Some say there's a remote corner of the earth where winter itself was first whispered into existence, a frozen cradle carved by ancient gods whose silent footsteps still echo faintly across the untouched snowfields. They claim the mountains here don't just stand, they murmur forgotten chants at dusk, low trembling hymns that drift through the icy air as rivers glow with a ghostly shimmer, as though carrying stories long drowned beneath centuries of frozen silence. Travelers who venture this far swear the atmosphere thickens around them, not merely with cold, but with the heavy gravity of secrets so old they seem to breathe on their own, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. The sky hangs impossibly low, stretching across the horizon like a solemn guardian, draped in pale glass, its unmoving gaze following every step you dare to take across this frost-bound sanctuary. Even the wind feels strangely sentient, curling around your body with slow, deliberate intention, as though it's quietly assessing whether you're a welcome guest or a trespasser in a story not meant for you. The ground beneath you rumbles in soft, distant tremors, like the heartbeat of something ancient slumbering deep below, hinting at forces that have shaped this land far longer than human memory can reach. Every trail twists and coils like an unsolved riddle, pulling you deeper, as if guiding your footsteps toward revelations you didn't realize your spirit had been aching to uncover. Now and then you catch flickers of surreal silhouettes, impossible towers of ice, black shores shimmering like crushed obsidian, waterfalls glowing with lunar white, and you wonder if they're real or visions conjured by wandering winter spirits. Silence becomes your truest companion, but it's a silence dense with presence, humming with life, the kind that makes you feel watched yet strangely welcomed. Even your breath seems transformed, crystallizing into tiny shards of silver light that swirl gently before dissolving back into the cold air, as if your existence is momentarily being woven into the myth itself. You begin to understand why old legends insist this land chooses who may witness its true face, revealing itself only to those willing to surrender certainty for wonder. Nothing around you feels ordinary. Everything seems woven with intention, like an invitation and a warning bound together in the same elusive breath. The deeper you wander, the more reality begins to warp, bending softly toward the extraordinary, until the familiar rules of the world feel distant and irrelevant. With each hesitant step, you sense the fragile edge of a legend brushing against your own life, blurring the boundary between the world you know and the world winter keeps for itself. This is Winter Wonder of Iceland, the coldest, purest, most stunning views ever captured. Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon, southeast Iceland. They say Iceland holds gateways to ancient realms, and in the heart of winter, Jökulsárlón Glacier Lagoon becomes one of those enigmatic thresholds where the boundaries between the natural world and the mythical unseen dissolve until you can barely distinguish one from the other. The lagoon rests in a quiet, icy embrace beneath the towering shadow of Vatnajökull, Europe's largest glacier, whose colossal mass has spent centuries sculpting, grinding, and reshaping this valley with its relentless breath of frost and its slow, crushing movements. This shimmering basin of ice, first forming around the 1930s, has since grown into a deep, expanding lagoon that pushes farther inland each year, a living testament to the glacier's constant retreat and the accelerating transformation of Iceland's frozen lands. In the depth of winter, the entire lagoon metamorphoses into a drifting kingdom of ice giants, with icebergs so impossibly blue, they seem illuminated from within by hidden spirits or ancient energies trapped in their frozen cores. Icelandic folklore speaks of mysterious beings called Isindir, ethereal ice guardians, said to wander silently between the massive icebergs each night, ensuring no mortal disturbs the delicate equilibrium of the lagoon's sacred stillness. Scientists, by contrast, attribute the lagoon's haunting symphony to pressure shifts and cracking ice sheets, though even the experts admit that the eerie echoes rolling across the water often sound eerily closer to forgotten chants than simple geology. wildlife further deepens the enchantment, with seals gliding beneath the icy surface like liquid silver shadows, and seabirds weaving through the frigid air as though carrying messages delivered directly from the ancient northern winds. During powerful winter storms, the swirling gusts sometimes sculpt the drifting ice into towering silhouettes that resemble frozen titans, fueling the enduring myth that the lagoon shelters the restless spirits of Viking explorers lost long ago beneath polar seas. Diamond Beach, just beyond the lagoon's mouth, glitters even more hypnotically during wintertime, when shards of ice washed ashore sparkle like enchanted diamonds, scattered purposely by unseen hands across a black volcanic canvas. Few travelers realize that within some of these icebergs lie delicate layers of volcanic ash, trapped from eruptions centuries past, turning each block of ice into a floating timeline, chronicling Iceland's fiery and glacial heritage. The lagoon frequently produces rare winter optical illusions, where refracted light fractures into halos, shimmering pillars, and prismatic arcs of color, which locals affectionately call signs from the North gods, as if the sky itself were sending coded messages. Beneath the surface, an uncanny blend of fresh water from the glacier and seawater from the Atlantic creates swirling undercurrents that twist, tilt, and rotate the icebergs like pieces being rearranged on a divine chessboard. Winter nights bring a level of stillness so profound that even a single crack of shifting ice ricochets across the lagoon with the sharpness of a whispered warning, echoing for miles through the darkness. For adventurers drifting across the lagoon in winter zodiac boats, the experience feels like entering a consecrated realm, navigating between towering luminescent ice walls that seem almost alive in their ancient crystalline silence. Scientists constantly monitor the lagoon to study the impacts of climate change, observing how rapidly the glacier melts and how each newly calved iceberg reveals clues through its translucent layers, shapes, and surreal shades of blue. Some travelers insist that the lagoon breathes, rising and falling in a slow, rhythmic motion with the tides, as though the entire basin possesses a hushed, ancient heartbeat pulsing beneath the ice. On exceptionally cold days, the wind carries microscopic crystals of diamond dust that shimmer in the sunlight, enchanting the landscape so completely it feels as though the entire world has been dusted with stardust. When the northern lights sweep across the winter sky and reflect on the lagoon's glassy surface, the scene becomes so vivid and otherworldly that it seems as if the heavens themselves have descended to meet the earth in a hushed, luminous embrace. Dot dot. Each iceberg drifting through the lagoon becomes its own sculpted character, some jagged and dangerous, others elegantly smooth and serene, all shaped by forces that feel equal parts natural, mystical, and cosmic. Winter amplifies the sense of mystery, muting sounds, deepening shadows, and making the lagoon appear suspended between time and timelessness, as if it exists outside the rules that govern ordinary landscapes. An eerie yet fascinating truth: divers have discovered deep branching channels hidden beneath the lagoon, cold, dark corridors that remain largely unexplored, leading many to imagine vast, submerged caverns or secret ice worlds guarded by unseen spirits. Local legends gently caution wanderers not to whistle after nightfall near the lagoon, for it is said the sound awakens the ascender and stirs sudden winds that reshape the ice in unpredictable ways. For travelers walking here in winter, the collision of black volcanic sand, sapphire blue ice, and shimmering silver snow feels like stepping directly into an ancient Icelandic saga etched into the land by gods, ghosts, and glaciers. A helpful travel tip: visit in mid-afternoon during winter, when the low-angled sunlight casts impossibly long shadows across the ice, creating dramatic silhouettes and enhancing the lagoon's otherworldly glow. And as you finally turn away from Jökulsárlón, the winter silence follows you like a final whisper, reminding you gently why this lagoon remains one of the most mystical, unforgettable highlights of winter wonder of Iceland. Diamond Beach, southeast Iceland. They say the southern coast of Iceland holds a place where the restless ocean reaches out like a thief in the night to steal diamonds from ancient giants. And that place is Diamond Beach, a surreal shoreline that feels far too enchanted, too impossible, to have been shaped by anything as ordinary as the natural world. Formed through centuries of relentless glacial calving from Jökulsárlón, this stark black sand coast became the final resting ground for luminous ice that journeyed from deep within the hidden chambers of Vatnajökull, carrying with it secrets older than kingdoms, older than myths, older than every saga ever committed to parchment. Winter sharpens the supernatural aura here, intensifying the sense that the ice carries a living pulse beneath its surface, as if slumbering beings of ancient frost stir quietly within each crystalline shard. The air becomes razor cold, slicing through layers of clothing with unforgiving precision, while winds sculpt the ice into strange shapes, contorted forms that resemble animals, wandering spirits, celestial messengers, and relics from forgotten eras. Under the dim, low-angle winter light, the ice gleams with such clarity and brilliance that locals insist it must be the handiwork of Alfar, the hidden folk, who polish each shard under moonlit nights to preserve the beach's otherworldly allure. Arctic foxes occasionally slip through the maze of crystals, their ghost-white fur blending so perfectly with the reflective ice that they appear more like fleeting apparitions drifting through a half-remembered dream than flesh-and-blood creatures. Scientists explain that the intense blue found in certain icebergs comes from centuries of immense pressure that squeezes out every air bubble, but the old legends claim something far more ancient, that the blue is the frozen breath of mighty sea dragons who once ruled Iceland's southern waters. Winter brings a chorus of eerie sounds as tides shift beneath the ice, causing massive shards to crack, hum, and resonate. Their echo stretches across the shore, like whispered warnings from unseen beings patrolling the margins between sea and land. Some travelers swear they've seen movement inside the ice, subtle flickers of shadows or shapes resembling faces, yet the moment they draw closer, the visions vanish, leaving only cold transparency behind. Local fishermen once believed Diamond Beach to be cursed, insisting the ocean possessed an appetite for anything unwatched, swallowing tools, nets, and even small boats with an unsettling hunger that defied explanation. The name Diamond Beach was coined not by modern tourists, but by sailors who, from far offshore, saw the sparkling coastline blazing against the black sand and mistook the scattered ice for immense treasure spilled by giants. From a scientific perspective, the beach's brilliance comes from ultra-pure glacial ice refracting sunlight like fragments of a colossal, frozen prism capable of bending winter light into unearthly patterns. Winter also reveals what locals call shadow diamonds, shards so perfectly translucent that they appear to consume darkness instead of reflecting light, creating black silhouettes glowing with invisible cold. Some pieces contain delicate streaks of volcanic ash, trapped during ancient eruptions, forming natural tattoos, dark, smoky veins etched by the violent marriage of fire and ice over centuries. At dusk, the stark contrast between black volcanic sand and luminous ice becomes so dramatic that walking here feels like stepping into a monochrome dreamscape painted by some cosmic artist with a palette of shadow and frozen light. But the hypnotic beauty conceals a ruthless danger, for sneaker waves crash with sudden, violent force, dragging icebergs the size of cars across the sand with enough momentum to shatter bones without warning. The Atlantic in winter is merciless, its sub-zero currents capable of pulling even strong swimmers deep beneath the surface in mere seconds, leaving no trace behind. Yet those who dare stand close enough to the tide line witness moments of indescribable magic when the northern lights descend, their shimmering emerald glow reflecting across the ice and giving the appearance of floating green fire drifting along the winter shore. Each block of ice becomes its own tiny universe, some crystal clear as glass, others filled with intricate bubble patterns that resemble trapped souls or frozen constellations suspended in time. When storms arrive, the shoreline transforms into a chaotic battlefield of colliding ice, producing metallic clinks and resonant ringing tones that sound eerily like a choir of glass bells being struck by invisible hands. Many travelers describe the experience as walking through a field of shattered stars scattered across the night, each fragment colder, brighter, and more fragile than the last. Folklore whispers that the beach tests the hearts of those who visit. Those who approach with reverence witness its beauty, while those who dismiss its power encounter the wrath of the sea's unpredictable temperament. Winter winds carve arches, domes, and crystalline towers from the ice, building miniature frozen kingdoms that shift and dissolve with each tide, ephemeral palaces born to vanish. Travel tip: never underestimate the surf here. Always keep a safe distance from the water, for this ocean is far more unpredictable and merciless than its glassy beauty would ever suggest. And as you wander between these shimmering fragments of ancient ice, Diamond Beach stops feeling like a mere destination and becomes something far stranger and deeper, a threshold into the cold, cryptic mysteries that define Iceland's winter soul. Thingvellir National Park, Southwest Iceland. Thingvellir National Park sits in one of the rarest geological zones on the planet, where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates slowly tear away from each other, sculpting a dramatic rift valley that stands as one of the only places on Earth where travelers can safely walk between continents across an exposed landscape shaped by planetary motion. Located in the windswept expanses of southwest Iceland, this UNESCO World Heritage Site is not only a geological marvel, but a cultural cornerstone, for it was here, amid rock, ice, and open sky, that Iceland's Althing Parliament was founded in 930 AD, making it an ancient cradle of law, governance, and early democratic practice. Winter conditions completely transform the valley as thick snowfall, low-angle sunlight, and plunging temperatures reveal its geological architecture with heightened clarity, almost as if winter strips away the world's distractions to show the Earth's bones. The climate here is starkly subarctic, with cutting winds sweeping across frozen lava fields and jagged fissures, layering intricate frost patterns over basalt surfaces and turning each rock into a microsculpture of shimmering, crystalline detail. Almannagjá, the park's main canyon, becomes especially photogenic in the winter season, as thin sheets of ice trace its towering tectonic walls, outlining vertical fractures like glowing lines on a massive stone manuscript. Vegetation across the park shifts into survival mode. Hardy mosses cling to frozen lava, birch patches retreat into their dormant forms, and scattered lichen endure the cold by slowing their metabolic rhythms almost to stillness. Winter wildlife is dominated by resilient birds and elusive Arctic foxes, whose seasonal white coats blend flawlessly into the snowy terrain, allowing them to slip unnoticed across the valley like wandering spirits. Thingvallavatn Lake, Iceland's largest natural lake, often freezes along its edges but maintains glassy liquid zones due to subtle geothermal influences swirling beneath its surface, creating contrasting bands of ice and open water. One of the most remarkable scientific features here is Silfra, a submerged rift filled with ancient glacial meltwater that has been filtered through volcanic rock for as long as a century, resulting in water so pure it offers nearly perfect visibility year-round. Winter diving in Silfra reveals a dreamlike world of submerged basalt columns, deep tectonic drop-offs, and tiny suspended ice particles that drift through the water like floating stars illuminated by refracted winter light. This extraordinary clarity makes Silfra a valuable site for hydrologists studying groundwater filtration, as it provides a natural model of how volcanic landscapes purify water over long geological timescales. Few visitors realize that Silfra's underwater temperature remains a consistent 2 to 4 degrees Celsius even in the coldest months, a stability that helps preserve its world-renowned clarity and prevents excessive freezing. Winter also brings atmospheric phenomena such as halo arcs, vertical sun pillars, and shimmering ice fog, formed when sunlight interacts with high concentrations of suspended ice crystals drifting through the valley. The Thingvellir Valley literally widens a few millimeters each year as the plates drift apart. Small movements meticulously recorded by scientific instruments placed across the rift zone. Each winter's snowfall enhances the visibility of tiny surface cracks, giving researchers seasonal windows to map newly formed fissures that would otherwise be camouflaged by summer vegetation. Foss waterfall, nestled within the park, partially freezes into layered curtains of ice that capture the freeze-thaw transitions of the season, patterns that climatologists study to track subtle shifts in temperature and moisture. For all its tranquility, Thingvellir remains a landscape of hidden risks. Icy trails, snow-covered fissures, and sudden weather changes challenge even experienced winter hikers to remain cautious and fully aware of the shifting conditions. On rare, perfectly still days, the valley fills with diamond dust, tiny ice crystals suspended in the air, glittering in the sunlight like drifting remnants of a broken halo. The low winter sun casts elongated shadows across the terrain, accentuating the contours of lava ridges, rock faults, and tectonic walls, turning the entire valley into a vast natural sculpture of black, white, and icy blue. The visual contrast between dark basalt cliffs, pure snow blankets, and brilliant blue fissures makes Thingvellir one of the most striking tectonic landscapes anywhere on Earth. Visitors often describe the panoramic view across the valley as resembling a massive fracture map of the planet's crust, a place where the Earth displays its internal architecture in plain sight. Winter silence amplifies even the faintest sounds: the distant rumble of flowing water, the crisp crack of shifting ice, and the soft crunch of snow, offering rare acoustic insights into how the landscape breathes through seasonal change. Some fissures hide submerged channels and branching underwater systems that scientists continue to explore, proving that even in such a well-known park, uncharted territory still waits beneath the ice. Travel tip: always monitor Icelandic weather alerts in winter, as sudden temperature plunges or incoming storms can rapidly alter snow stability, trail conditions, and visibility across the rift zones. In winter's stark clarity, Thingvellir reveals not only the immense forces that shape our planet, but also the delicate, ephemeral beauty that unfolds across every frozen fault line and silent snow-draped fissure. Svartafoss Waterfall, Skaftafell, Southeast Iceland. There are places in Iceland where the landscape seems to vibrate with a hushed, almost imperceptible frequency, as though something ancient and half asleep stirs beneath the snow. And deep within the Skaftafell region lies one such place, waiting patiently for wanderers who move slowly enough, quietly enough, to hear the land breathe. At first glance, the forested trail gives away nothing remarkable, just winding winter paths lined with dark moss, clusters of frost-laced birch, and scattered volcanic stones that crunch softly underfoot like muted echoes of distant eruptions. But the farther you walk, the more the valley begins to draw inward, its walls narrowing into a world shaped by glaciers, shadows, and the subtle pull of gravity, as if guiding you step by step toward a hidden masterpiece sculpted by Earth's ancient imagination. And then, almost as if the landscape has been holding its breath for the reveal, Svartifoss emerges. Its towering basalt columns rising like enormous organ pipes forged from volcanic glass. So dramatic and deliberate that the entire scene feels arranged by some cosmic set designer. The waterfall earned its name, the Black Falls, because its waters spill over ancient basalt formations created thousands of years ago when molten lava cooled and fractured into impossibly precise geometric pillars. Winter transforms these volcanic columns into a surreal wonder, draping them in rippling ice curtains and delicate frozen filigree that sparkle under pale sunlight, like the crystalline armor of a sleeping giant. The climate here is piercingly crisp, with Arctic winds tumbling down from the vast Vatnajökull glacier, turning even the smallest droplets into glittering pearls of ice that cling to the rock like frozen tears. Despite the harshness of the season, resilient mosses cling stubbornly to the cliff edges, while ravens circle overhead, dark silhouettes weaving effortlessly through the icy air, blending into the basalt backdrop as if they were part of the rock itself. Few visitors realize that these iconic hexagonal columns inspired elements of Icelandic architecture. Most famously, the majestic Hallgrímskirkja church in Reykjavik, whose facade echoes the cathedral-like geometry found here. Scientifically, the striking columns formed when rapidly cooling lava contracted and cracked into precise hexagonal shapes, a natural process similar to the one that created the famed Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. Local folklore adds another dimension to the scene, whispering that the cliff was once home to hidden folk who lived deep within the basalt chambers, emerging only during the winter solstice to sing alongside the falling water. Some travelers even claim they have heard faint murmurs within the columns, soft whispers or echoing hums, though geologists explain these as sound reverberations bouncing inside the tight rock chambers. Winter hikes here offer entirely different moments than summer can provide, like hearing delicate icicles crack under shifting temperatures or watching fine white frost creep across black basalt in slow, crystalline waves. When the afternoon sun strikes just right, the whole waterfall glows with an astonishing cinematic contrast, obsidian rock framed by silvery ice, creating scenes that look like they were crafted for epic fantasy films. Snow along the trail absorbs and softens every footstep, making the journey feel like drifting through a silent dream where even the trees seem to hold their breath. In the coldest weeks, parts of the waterfall freeze into suspended arcs and icy ribbons, giving the illusion that time itself has halted mid-motion. Those who dare approach close to the base of the falls discover intricate textures etched by millennia of wind, water, and volcanic heat. Tiny grooves and patterns that read like a secret history carved into stone. The columnar cliffs form a natural amphitheater, amplifying the waterfall's voice into a deep, resonant roar that feels far larger than its size would suggest. A lesser-known detail is that some basalt pillars contain thin veins of trapped minerals, which shimmer under layers of ice like hidden treasure locked within stone vaults. The danger here is real. Icy paths hide loose rocks and uneven ground, and snow often conceals fissures that require careful footing and full attention. Yet this element of risk only heightens the thrill of reaching one of Iceland's most sculptural and architecturally perfect waterfalls. Winter storms sometimes blanket the entire cliff in delicate hoarfrost, transforming the columns into what looks like a monochrome cathedral carved from frozen ink and glass. Photographers frequently compare Svartafoss in winter to a living ink painting, bold black strokes intersecting shimmering white in stark, elegant contrast. Travel tip: wear waterproof boots with strong traction and warm layers, because the final uphill approach can be steep, slippery, and exposed to biting Arctic wind. And as you stand before its towering basalt walls shimmering under the cold light, Svartafoss reveals itself not just as a waterfall, but as a masterpiece shaped equally by fire, ice, and the relentless patience of geological time. Reynisfjara and Reynisdrangar Black Sand Beach, South Iceland. In the far south of Iceland, where ghostly mist clings to steep cliffs and the horizon dissolves into a shifting blur between sea and sky, there lies a shoreline whispered about in old stories for centuries before it ever appeared on maps or in travelers' journals. Those who journey toward it say the air itself changes as you draw near, growing heavier and colder, as though the land is quietly preparing your senses for something ancient, raw, and completely untamed. And then the narrow trail widens, revealing Yara, a beach of ink-black volcanic sand that looks less like part of the natural world and more like the shadowed floor of some forgotten underworld carved by elemental forces. From the churning North Atlantic rise the Reynisdrangar sea stacks, three towering dark sentinels that folklore claims were once trolls frozen in stone by the unforgiving first light of dawn as they struggled to drag a ship to shore. Winter drapes the entire scene in stark, breathtaking contrasts, dusting the black sand with white snow as icy waves crash against the basalt with thunderous, bone-deep resonance. The climate here is notoriously unforgiving, shaped by relentless Atlantic storms that march inland like colossal giants and winds so sharp they sting any exposed skin within seconds. Yet even in such harsh conditions, life endures. Ravens glide overhead like sweeping shadows. Winter seabirds nest in the cliffside crevices. And hardy moss glows faintly green where pockets of melted snow reveal its resilience. One fascinating scientific detail often overlooked is that the basalt columns behind the beach were formed through slow, steady cooling of ancient lava, creating perfectly geometric pillars aligned like the pipes of a colossal stone organ. These towering columns sometimes produce uncanny echoes when winter winds rush through them, fueling legendary tales that whisper of spirits trapped within the volcanic stone. Locals often say that Reynisdrangar tests the intentions of every visitor who steps onto its sands. For those who ignore warnings or underestimate the ocean risk being claimed by the sea without a single moment of mercy. Sneaker waves, silent, swift, and far-reaching, surge across the sand like the dark, grasping hands of an unseen force, arriving with neither pattern nor warning. Countless stories tell of fishermen lost to these waters, their spirits believed to wander near the Reynisdrangar stacks on storm-heavy nights when the wind howls like forgotten voices. Winter adds an eerie layer to the already dramatic landscape. Frozen mist lingers low across the beach. Thin ice forms delicate patterns along basalt walls, and waves slam the shore with a deep, resonant thunder that seems to vibrate through the chest. The Halsanef Shalir cave becomes a realm of shifting shadows in the winter months, its curved basalt columns gleaming like obsidian teeth under the pale seasonal light. Some visitors claim the cave amplifies whispers not spoken by human voices, though scientists explain this phenomenon as nothing more than wind channels and echoing acoustics within the geometric stone. During storms, ghostly white sea spray drifts across the black sand, like wandering spirits searching for a place to rest. Winter sunsets cast fiery red and molten gold light on the sea stacks, transforming them into blazing silhouettes that appear to rise from the ocean like mythic titans returning to life. This beach becomes a place of deep contemplation. Standing before the endless force of the Atlantic makes travelers acutely aware of their own smallness in a world defined by ancient natural power. Photographers often describe Reynes Yara's winter scenery as something out of a living myth, a place where folklore seems to step into reality with every crash of the waves. Snowfall often blurs the boundary between land and sea, making the Reynes Drangar stacks appear as if they're hovering weightlessly in the frozen air. A fun scientific detail is that the sand here is so fine, so densely volcanic, that it absorbs heat rapidly, sometimes creating steam-like wisps when fresh snow settles on its dark surface. Winter explorers come seeking long exposure shots of waves that stretch into white ribbons, surreal fog creeping across the beach, and the haunting interplay between ice crystals and black lava stone. But the danger remains ever present. Even the most experienced guides approach the shoreline with a level of respect that feels almost like reverence, knowing how deceptive and deadly the ocean can be here. Travel tip: always stay well back from the shoreline, no matter how calm or predictable the surf appears. Reynisfjara's waves are masters of deception, hiding their strength until the moment they strike. And as you stand watching the sea crash itself against Reynisdrangar, the beach stops feeling like a mere destination and becomes instead a living myth. One you don't just visit, but briefly step inside before the land decides it is time for you to leave. Gullfoss Waterfall, Southwest Iceland. When you first approach Gullfoss in Southwest Iceland, you don't merely hear a waterfall. You hear the thunderous echo of a geological history sculpted over 10,000 years, where glacial force and volcanic fire clash relentlessly and carve their story into the canyon long before humans ever set foot here. Positioned dramatically along the fierce Havita River, Gullfoss cascades through a rugged ice-chiseled gorge that was formed when powerful meltwater from Langjökull Glacier burst through layers of ancient ash, dense basalt, and hardened lava flows left behind by Iceland's fiery past. The falls plunge a combined 32 meters in two mighty steps, funneling millions of liters of water through a canyon so raw and imposing that early travelers believed only mythical giants could have shaped its sculpted walls. Winter wraps this canyon in an entirely new identity, transforming it into a realm of natural frozen artwork as frigid winds whip the mist skyward, weaving snow feathers, crystalline curtains, and delicate frost armor across every exposed surface. On especially bitter days, the plunging water appears to hesitate midair, creating the legendary half-frozen waterfall illusion that has made Gullfoss one of the iconic winter marvels of Iceland. Surrounding the falls are resilient winter mosses, flocks of cold-adapted birds, and the occasional glimpse of an Arctic fox whose pristine white coat melts so seamlessly into the snow that it feels like a spirit drifting across the landscape. Few visitors realize that the canyon's unique geometry manipulates sound in uncanny ways, causing Gullfoss to roar, rumble, or whisper differently depending on the wind's direction and speed. One of the most compelling tales linked to this waterfall is the story of Sigridur Tómasdóttir, the determined young woman who fought tirelessly to protect Gullfoss when foreign investors sought to harness its power. Walking barefoot through ice and snow all the way to Reykjavik to plead for its preservation. Locals like to say her spirit still wanders the cliffs on stormy days, guarding the majestic waterfall she loved so intensely that her devotion became part of Iceland's environmental legacy. Scientists often refer to Gullfoss as a dynamic freeze-thaw system because the interplay between glacial meltwater and brutal Icelandic winter temperatures produces endlessly shifting ice layers, formations, and textures. Some visitors are lucky enough to witness ice rainbows, delicate spectral arches that appear when winter sunlight aligns perfectly with frozen mist rising from the falls. Adventurers flock here in winter to tread the snowy paths along the canyon's edge, experiencing the exhilarating contrast between the stillness of frozen terrain and the ceaseless roar of water crashing through the gorge. Although the Golden Circle route makes Gullfoss relatively accessible year-round, winter ensures that each step feels untamed, unpredictable, and infused with raw Icelandic wilderness. Deep in the canyon, wisps of steam rise where Arctic winds collide with the comparatively warmer river below, creating the surreal impression that the Earth itself is exhaling into the frozen air. From a geological viewpoint, the canyon's exposed rock layers act like a vertical timeline of Iceland's natural history, revealing evidence of ancient volcanic eruptions and past glacial movements embedded in every striation. During particularly cold winters, visitors occasionally witness ice domes forming over the first tier of the falls, only for these frozen shells to burst open hours later in dramatic displays when trapped water pressure forces them apart. The dangers here are undeniable. Icy walkways, sudden gusts that sweep across the cliffs, and viewpoints glazed in frost make caution not just recommended, but absolutely essential. Yet this very sense of danger is part of what makes Gullfoss so captivating, as the frozen canyon pulses with raw energy that reminds you just how wild and untamed Iceland remains. Winter storms sometimes cloak the entire gorge in a thick coat of frost, sculpting the jagged volcanic rock into what look like white marble statues handcrafted by the invisible artistry of wind and ice. Photographers cherish this season as winter shadows stretch dramatically across the canyon walls, highlighting ridges and textures that remain hidden during warmer months. Some travelers swear that the waterfall changes its voice as dusk approaches, the cooling air shifting its tone from a sharp roar to a deeper, more resonant growl that feels almost sentient. Popular winter activities include studying the intricate ice formations, capturing long exposure shots of cascading water beneath frozen cliffs, and watching the sun dip behind the gorge in spectacular bursts of golden blue. A critical travel tip: always remain behind the rope barriers, as thick snow can disguise unstable ground in sudden drop-offs carved into the canyon's edges by centuries of erosion. Reykjanes Peninsula, southwest Iceland. Icelanders say the Reykjanes Peninsula is not merely land, but a vast frontier where the ancient spirits of fire and ice still test their strength beneath a cold, restless winter sky, shaping the earth with powers that seem older than time itself. You sense this long before the landscape reveals anything. The wind begins to whisper strangely around your ears. The ground thrums with faint vibrations under your boots, and the air carries an unexpected warmth rising from hidden cracks that hint at deep forces moving below. This is the place where the world quite literally splits in two, where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates drift apart like colossal giants, slowly stepping away from each other over the course of millennia. Ancient lava fields stretch endlessly into the distance, twisted and hardened into bizarre shapes that locals once believed were the petrified remains of trolls caught by the morning sun. Winter cloaks this rugged volcanic expanse in sheets of white, making every plume of geothermal steam stand out starkly against the snow, like ghostly silhouettes crossing the frozen plains. Legend says the scalding hot springs of Gunnevere were claimed long ago by the tormented spirit Gunna, who continues to wander through the roaring vents and swirling steam in search of vengeance she never fulfilled. Another tale whispers that the powerful winds sweeping across the peninsula are actually the voices of Valkyries racing overhead, Their presence felt strongest when brutal winter storms begin to close in. Scientifically, Reykjanes is Iceland's most active geothermal zone, shaking constantly with mini earthquakes, magma migrations, and sudden steam surges beneath the planet's crust. But to those who pause and listen closely, the land seems to breathe, shift, and mutter like something alive, an ancient organism adjusting itself under layers of snow and lava. Only the toughest forms of life manage to survive here. Moss gripping tightly to jagged volcanic rock, seabirds slicing through razor-sharp winds, and Arctic foxes moving like pale, cautious shadows through the winter haze. Fun fact, at the bridge between continents, travelers can quite literally stand with one foot on the North American plate and the other on the Eurasian plate, straddling two continents in a single breath. Winter transforms the entire peninsula into a stark monochrome kingdom built from rock, snow, steam, and sky, a landscape stripped to its most elemental form. When the auroras appear, the sky glows like a river of green and violet fire flowing above boiling mud pools and steaming fissures. Steam columns rise into the cold air like the chimneys of some vast underground city carved out by forces no human has ever seen. On exceptionally cold nights, the geothermal mist freezes midair into glittering crystals that drift slowly across the lava fields like tiny spirits returning to the earth. Travelers often describe the peninsula as a place that feels suspended between the real world and an unseen mythic realm, half earth, half legend. Brimkatil, the natural lava pool on the coast, is said to be the bathing place of a mighty sea troll who returns during stormy nights to reclaim the churning waters. Winter storms here are the stuff of legend themselves. Furious gusts strong enough to sweep snow sideways across the landscape like streams of silver sand. The peninsula holds centuries of Viking lore, old navigation tales, and beliefs buried deep in rock and steam, passed down through generations of coastal settlers. But it also holds invaluable scientific wonders, exposed tectonic fractures, geothermal energy vents, and young landforms that offer clues about how new crust emerges from the deep. Winter amplifies every sensation, the distinct tang of sulfur drifting through the air, the howl of relentless wind against the cliffs, and sudden bursts of steam rising violently from the earth. The wow moment comes when visitors finally realize they are witnessing Earth in its raw, unfinished, ever-changing form, a planet still shaping itself in real time. But Reykjanes demands respect. Its brutal winds, sharp cliffs, and boiling pools can be unforgiving to the careless or the overly curious. Greater than travel tip, always check wind warnings before exploring. Reykjanes is known for having the strongest winds in all of Iceland, capable of knocking over even seasoned hikers with a single gust. And as you leave the peninsula behind, stepping away from its living, shifting ground, it feels as though you're walking away from a myth still being written in fire, frost, and the restless heartbeat of the earth. Kirkjufell and Kirkjufellsfoss, West Iceland. On the quiet, frost-laced roads of West Iceland, where the land seems to stretch endlessly beneath vast, pale winter skies, there comes a moment when a solitary shape begins to rise from the horizon like a distant mirage slowly sharpening into reality. At first, it appears to be nothing more than another gentle hill softened under layers of drifting snow. But with every step closer, its perfect symmetry emerges more clearly, until the unmistakable outline of Kirkjufell stands before you like a sculpture carved from the Earth's ancient memory. Often called the most photographed mountain in Iceland, Kirkjufell owes its dramatic, arrow-like shape to millions of years of glacial erosion that stripped away softer layers of stone and left behind a steep, narrow peak polished by ice ages long gone. Nearby, the gentle cascade of Kirkjufellsfoss flows over stacked volcanic rock, forming a picture-perfect foreground so iconic and harmonious that the entire scene feels intentionally composed for a postcard or a cinematic masterpiece. Winter elevates this landscape into something otherworldly, as icy winds sweep down from the Snæfellsnes Peninsula and frost paints the mountain's ridges with delicate silver strokes, transforming its slopes into shimmering geometric lines. The subarctic climate brings long, luminous winter nights, and with them, some of the brightest auroras on the peninsula, which dance directly above the mountain's sharp silhouette like celestial ribbons of green and violet fire. Hardy vegetation such as moss, Arctic grasses, and patches of low-lying shrubs cling stubbornly to the lower slopes, while winter birds glide silently around the falls as if moving in a slow-motion ballet choreographed by the wind. A fun detail many travelers overlook is that Kirkjufell is actually the eroded remnant of an ancient volcanic system, shaped and reshaped by multiple glaciations until it assumed its famous pyramid-like form. Scientists study its exposed layers because each distinct band of rock reveals a different chapter in Iceland's geological saga, from violent eruptions to long periods of glacial sculpting. Local legends tell that Kirkjufell once served as the dwelling place of mighty trolls who were turned to stone when caught by the first light of sunrise, a tale that feels strangely fitting the moment you see its lonely silhouette rising against the sky. Other folklore suggests that hidden folk live deep inside the mountain, coming out only during the darkest, quietest winter nights when the veil between worlds is said to be thinnest. Winter also brings rare optical illusions, as tiny airborne ice crystals bend and scatter the light, forming faint halos or glowing arcs around the mountain during the coldest mornings. When snow blankets the tiered steps of the waterfall, Kirkjufelsfoss transforms into a frozen staircase, leading upward into vast white emptiness, beautiful, surreal, and ghostly in its stillness. Photographers from around the world gather here in winter to capture that legendary composition, the frozen waterfall in the foreground, the razor-sharp mountain behind it, and auroras swirling across the night like luminous brushstrokes. The waterfall itself forms icy arcs, crystalline plates, and delicate frost feathers that crack softly under shifting temperatures, producing subtle sounds that blend with the river's muted rumble. Some visitors report hearing faint echoes around the mountain, soft, disembodied reverberations caused by wind and sound bouncing off snow-covered ridges and the mountain's sharply angled walls. Winter activities include cautiously hiking near the falls, photographing aurora-lit nights, tracing the shoreline for reflected views of the peak, and watching rare snowstorms swirl around the mountain like a moving veil. But the wow factor reaches its peak at sunset, when the winter sky blushes pink, lavender, and deep gold, reflecting off the snow to create a pastel aura surrounding the mountain's outline. Winter's extended darkness also creates the perfect conditions for jaw-dropping auroras, which often shimmer above Kirkjufell, like serpentine lights dancing across the heavens. From a scientific standpoint, the mountain becomes even more visually striking in winter because snow accentuates its stratified layers, making its fossil-like geological structure easier to see from a distance. The surrounding coastline sometimes produces sea smoke during extreme cold, thin, ethereal mist drifting above warmer ocean water that forms swirling, ghost-like clouds around the base of the mountain. A little-known fact is that Kirkjufell has been featured in numerous films and TV series, including Game of Thrones, chosen for its otherworldly shape and natural symmetry that feels almost too perfect to be real. But danger exists even in this tranquil beauty. Icy trails, strong coastal winds, and slippery rocks near the waterfall require caution, awareness, and respect for the harsh winter conditions. Travel tip: always use micro spikes in winter. Sections of the path around Kirkjufellsfoss become deceptively slick, even when they appear safe or lightly dusted with snow. And as you finally stand before the mountain's flawless silhouette framed by winter stars, it becomes unmistakably clear why Kirkjufell remains one of Iceland's most mesmerizing and unforgettable natural icons. A place where earth, ice, and myth converge into a perfect moment. Geysir and Strákar, southwest Iceland. In the depths of Iceland's winter, when snow blankets entire fields and silence flows through valleys like a slow-moving river, there lies a place where the ground itself refuses to surrender to the season's long sleep. Travelers often say they feel a subtle warmth underfoot before they see even the faintest hint of activity ahead, as if ancient forces are stirring beneath the frozen crust and breathing softly through cracks in the earth. And then, through veils of drifting mist, the geysers of Haukadalur reveal themselves. Geysir, the ancient elder whose name birthed the word geyser, and Strákar, the unruly child who never learned to rest. Legend claims that Geysir was once a fiery spirit dwelling deep beneath the ground, awakened by volcanic fury and tamed only by the slow passing of centuries. Strákar, however, is said to be mischievous and impatient, erupting over and over with playful defiance, refusing to let even the harshness of winter silence its elemental voice. Winter transforms the valley into a realm of contradictions, snow drifting softly onto boiling pools, steam rising from fissures like wandering ghosts searching for the warmth they lost. The air is brutally cold, yet the earth exhales heat through vents that hiss, bubble, and churn like enchanted cauldrons performing ancient rituals. Hardy moss clings stubbornly near the steaming vents, nourished by geothermal warmth, while ravens circle through thermal currents, drifting effortlessly above clouds of rising heat. Few realize that early Icelanders believed these geysers were portals to fiery underworld realms, gateways where spirits of magma and steam crossed into the world of humans. One old tale insists that the valley whispers warnings during violent winter storms, urging travelers to keep their distance from the shifting, unstable ground. Scientifically, each eruption begins when superheated water deep beneath the surface builds immense pressure, forcing itself upward in sudden, explosive bursts of steam and liquid fire. But to stand beside Strachur in the heart of winter is to understand why mythology clings so naturally to this place. Each eruption feels alive, like a living creature throwing its head skyward in a fierce, elemental roar. The magical moment before eruption, when a perfect sapphire dome swells upward, shimmering with electric blue light, looks so surreal that it seems like a spirit forming beneath the water's skin. Snowflakes that drift near the surface vanish instantly, dissolving into tiny puffs of steam that rise upward like miniature smoke signals sent from the earth itself. When winter breeze shifts direction, the entire valley is swallowed in dense fog so thick that Geysir's silhouette disappears completely, dissolving into a white void where sky and land blend together. Winter storms roar across the geothermal field, whipping steam into spirals and twisting plumes that resemble ghostly figures marching silently across the frozen ground. Occasionally, the rising steam freezes mid-air into delicate ice crystals that drift slowly like tiny spirits shimmering in the pale winter light. Locals often say that if you stand still and listen carefully, you can hear the earth muttering and grumbling beneath your feet, a reminder that Iceland's fiery heart is always awake. Visitors describe a mix of humility and exhilaration here, caught between the living fire below and the hard, unyielding ice above, feeling small yet profoundly alive. Rare winter moments occur when sunlight pierces the clouds, catching the drifting steam and illuminating it in radiant gold, transforming the entire valley into something that looks nothing short of divine. But danger lingers beneath the beauty. The fragile crust hides scalding water just below the surface, and one misplaced step can lead to burns or worse. Yet with careful respect and a safe distance, travelers witness a spectacle unmatched anywhere on Earth. Boiling water erupting into freezing air, merging fire and ice in explosive, breathtaking harmony. Travel tip: keep back from the main splash zone, especially in winter, because the wind can hurl scalding droplets far beyond the usual safety perimeter. And as you turn to leave the valley of Geysir and Strukur, the ground continues to pulse and breathe behind you, as though the living earth itself is offering one last, lingering farewell. Seljalandsfoss Waterfall, South Iceland. Approaching South Iceland's coastline, it's easy to overlook the narrow white streak on the cliffside until you realize it's moving, falling, dropping a full 60 meters in a single vertical plunge. This is Seljalandsfoss, formed where meltwater from Eyjafjallajökull cascades over ancient sea cliffs created by tectonic uplift and glacial retreat. Its origin lies in post-Ice Age geological evolution, when the shoreline receded and left river channels suspended above the valley floor. Winter dramatically alters its appearance, with sub-zero temperatures freezing mist into layered ice formations that drape the cliff like crystalline armor. The climate in this region is cold, windy, and variable, with sudden weather shifts making the landscape feel alive. Vegetation such as hardy moss and ground cover plants survive thanks to constant moisture. Birds continue to frequent the cliffs, especially ravens and winter gulls adapted to cold coastal air. A fun scientific detail, Seljalandsfoss's freefall allows researchers to observe how water disperses in freezing air, often creating ice feathers along the cliff. Behind the waterfall lies a natural alcove formed by centuries of erosion, offering a rare 360-degree view when conditions allow. Winter, however, often seals this path with ice, turning it into a dangerous but fascinating frozen tunnel. A lesser-known phenomenon is cold fog, created when mist cools rapidly and forms low-lying clouds around the base. When sunlight hits these clouds, it produces dramatic shadow patterns across snow-covered ground. Historian accounts suggest settlers once used the cave behind the waterfall as shelter during harsh storms. Legends add that hidden folk guarded this passageway, visible only during the darkest winter nights. Winter brings special conditions, frozen spray thickening into sculptural ice walls, and occasionally, partial freezing of the waterfall itself. Snow reflected in the mist creates a prismatic effect, scattering light in subtle rainbow hues visible only at close range. Scientists observe how water flow changes as the outer edges of the waterfall freeze, redirecting the inner stream. The soundscape also shifts. Snow absorbs ambient noise, amplifying the deep roar of falling water. Travelers often describe the winter experience here as standing between two elements: airborne ice in front, solid ice behind. The view from behind the waterfall, when accessible, reveals a circular frame of snow, ice, and wind-driven spray. Winter storms add dramatic visuals, turning the waterfall into a roaring white column surrounded by swirling snow. The wow factor is undeniable. Very few waterfalls in the world offer such a complete immersion experience. Filmmakers favor this location because winter light refracts beautifully through the mist. Travel tip: waterproof layers are essential. Cellulose will soak you even when the air is freezing. And when you step back and watch the waterfall glowing in the winter light, you understand why Seljalandsfoss is one of Iceland's most iconic winter spectacles.